Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question was suggested by a viewer, thanks to Spiteful AZ for this one, and I'm also told that it belongs to the True Stories collection. Nick controls a grizzly bear that's equipped with Lothlorien Blade. Amy threatens the bear and attacks Nick with it. What happens? Okay, so the first thing that I want to note is that there's no rule against having an equipment controlled by one player attached to a creature controlled by a different player. Because the equip ability only lets you target a creature you control, this situation normally can't come up, but if it somehow does, the game won't try to do anything to fix it. If Nick had played an aspect of the lamprey on his bear before this happened, that would work a little bit differently. After threat and resolves, grizzly bears would no longer be a creature Nick controls, so it would no longer match the condition on aspect of the lamprey's enchant ability. Unlike the previous case, there actually is a rule that will come in to fix that situation. The aspect of the lamprey will be put into Nick's graveyard the next time state-based actions are performed. So now that we've established that the Lothlorien Blade will remain equipped to the grizzly bears, what will happen with the triggered ability when it attacks? While Threaten gives control of the creature to Amy, the equipment remains under Nick's control. This is important because of the way the attack trigger is worded. It's an ability of the equipment, not of the equipped creature. I made a video a couple of months ago where I talked about this distinction in some detail, and I recommend that you check that out if you're interested in some more information about the difference in templating behind this. But for now, let's explore some of the consequences of that fact. Since Nick's equipment has the ability, Nick will be the ability's controller, which means that he will be the one to choose which creature is targeted. This choice does need to be a legal target, so Nick will have to choose one of his own creatures to take that damage. If this ability were worded such that it was optional to deal the damage, Nick would also be the one to make that decision. But unfortunately for him, there isn't any language saying that you may deal or up to one target creature that would get him out of this. One of Nick's creatures is taking two here, and it cannot be the grizzly bears that's attacking him because that's a creature Amy controls while this is happening. One other kind of interesting thing to think about would be what would happen if Nick didn't do this. As mentioned before, Nick is the controller of this triggered ability, which means that he is officially responsible for demonstrating awareness of it at the appropriate time. If the judge believes that Nick missed this trigger intentionally because he didn't want to kill one of his own creatures, well, that would be cheating. But if the judge believes that Nick just honestly forgot about it, or didn't realize that it would trigger here, or maybe just that Nick thought it was Amy's responsibility to remember the trigger, then the appropriate infraction would be missed trigger. If this was regular rel, then I would just put the trigger on the stack as soon as this was noticed, assuming that we were still relatively close to the point in the game where it should have happened. But at competitive rel, the situation is a little bit more formalized. So let's see exactly what the policy documents have to say about this. Certainly the correct infraction is a missed trigger, and the fix is basically what I just said earlier. Amy is the opponent of the player who controls that trigger, so she would choose whether it goes onto the stack if it's discovered prior to the end of the combat phase on Nick's turn, which is officially defined as the cutoff for being relatively close to the point in the game where it should have happened. One kind of interesting part about this is that we have this clause here, which says that if Nick played a creature after the ability should have triggered but before it gets put onto the stack this way, then he cannot target that creature with the ability. But of course, the really interesting question, especially for those who are already acquainted with how missed triggers work at competitive rel, would be the point of whether Nick would get a warning. Colloquially, judges usually say that the answer to this question depends on whether the triggered ability is generally considered detrimental to Nick. But this is kind of an unusual case, so I think it calls for a full reading of the relevant passage of the policy documents. As you can see, the penalty should be upgraded to a warning if the triggered ability is usually considered detrimental for the controlling player and they own the card responsible for the existence of the trigger. I think it should be pretty uncontroversial to say that Lothlorien Blade's ability isn't usually considered detrimental for its controller. Further, this passage clarifies that the specifics of the game state should not factor into that determination. So based on my reading of those passages, the policy documents do not support a warning in this case. Your mileage may vary, and I could definitely see a judge disagreeing with my interpretation, but that's how I would rule if this were to come up in a tournament that I was judging. But that's all I have for you today. What do you think? Should Nick get a warning here? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.